Today is my day to talk about travel stories, and one of the more fascinating travel trips that I have is in Mongolia. And Mongolia is not a place where a lot of people go. It's not a great tourist destination, especially if you want to see by the beach. It's the furthest low away from any ocean in the world of any point is there in Mongolia. It's dark and cold in wintertime and very long days in the summer, but very short summer. Very short time for product to grow. There's a lot of what we talk about in Tragedy of the Commons on because the land is publicly owned and there's nomads, so nobody really takes care of it because everybody owns it. A whole other story. We'll talk about that sometime when we talk about economics. But my trip is there, and we flew in. I was working on flew into there the first time, and we were working on horse meat. We were going to develop a horse meat program to export horse meat to Japan. In Japan, they'll actually use horse meat. You can have horse meat sushi at the restaurants. And so we said, here's Mongolia, where they've got more horses than they do people, and the horses really are their wealth. That's how how they determine the wealth of a family is by the number of horses they have. You think about it, you can only ride one horse at a time. And a horse will have a foal every year. A mature mare will have a foal every year. So you don't really need a lot of horses, but these families will have hundreds of horses in some cases. And when the horses get old, they just die and they don't do anything with them. Or they're raising the horses and they could sell a lot of them. They could sell a lot of them into the meat market. And they eat horse meat in Central Asia. I've had it in a couple of locations. Another story, another time. But in Mongolia, they ate the horse meat. But I went to the grocery store and I picked up a jar, and it's like a jar of blueberries, blueberry jam. I said, "You guys have blueberries here?" "Yeah, we have them up around Lake Baikal, up by the Russian border, but we don't harvest it because there is no market." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no market? How can you say there's no market for blueberries? Anybody can sell blueberries. Blueberries demand exceeds supply, and it will for a long, long time." They go, "Yeah, but we haven't done anything with it." I said, "Well, we can. We can develop something there." So I said, "Okay, well, tell me about it." They told me about it. I said, "Well, I can get some interest." Went back to my good friends in Japan, Dr. Uno, Mr. Ide, and Nagashima. Dr. Uno was with Nippon Delmani. Mr. Ide, Norio Ide, had his own company, and Nagashima was with Pacific Trading, which is a division of Kikkoman. And I explained the situation, and they said, "Hey, we can sell that." So we go up there the first time together, and we fly into. I fly into Mongolia Ulaanbaatar, and in Ulaanbaatar, I had our meetings there, and then we were flying from Ulaanbaatar up to. Let me check where that's at. So we're in Ulaanbaatar, which this is around 2010. They had a population of 1.14 million. It's the largest city in the country. It's the capital. It's still very rural. There's still, sheep herds walking down the middle of the streets. You have to be careful in the wintertime because it snows, and people will take the grates on the street and take them in and melt them for. Actually, they'll use them a lot of times for the Mongolian grills. They'll use them to cook on, or they'll melt them. So if you're walking in the snow, you can fall into a hole into the sewer system, or people will be down in there because it's warm. So it's really a fascinating place. Anyway, we're going to fly from there to Erdenet. We're going to fly from there to Lake Ulaanbaatar, and then we bought our tickets from there, and that's where we're going to go. But they changed the flights. So instead of going direct to Lake Baikal, they flew to Erdenet because there were a few passengers that wanted to get off there. And Erdenet, again, in 2010, had about 80,000 people. So that was the second largest city in the country. So instead of going up to where we went, we stopped without warning. We stopped at a smaller town. They offloaded passengers, and then we flew on to Lake Baikal. In Lake Baikal, we did our work, and I'll talk about that as the blueberry work is a great example of what we've done. At the end of the week, we had to drive back. We couldn't fly back because there weren't any flights from there for 10 days. And it's like, well, it's going to take us 3 days to drive back, or we can wait 5 days for a flight. So we drove back. And we had USAID trucks, and I can show you some pictures of some of those. And we took these SUVs, these Land Rovers in most cases, or Range Rovers, Land Rovers, not Range Rovers, Toyota Land Rover, Land Cruisers, Toyota Land Cruisers. Took these Land Cruisers, and we went 1,600 kilometers, about 800 miles. roughly, from Lake Baikal down to Ulaanbaatar. And I don't want to say we traveled on roads because there weren't roads. They were really cattle trails or horse trails. And you'd come into a valley and you'd be able to look at different trails and say, do I want to take this trail, or this trail? They probably all end up connecting back again at the other side of the valley. So you'd choose which one you wanted to take. And you'd get in it and you go, and it was 4-wheel driving for 1,200 kilometers. Finally, after 1,200 kilometers, we got to where there was a paved road. But as we traveled, it was fascinating because you were in the middle of nowhere, and you'd see somebody walking, and you'd look around. And it's like, where are they walking to or from? First of all, why are they walking? They have 150 horses, and they're walking. They're just walking, and you just, who knows where they're going. So they're walking, and a great example for us to explore and to understand the tragedy of the commons, which again we'll talk about when we talk about economics. But we see these horses everywhere, there's sheep everywhere. At one point in time, we really aided the locals because one of their trucks had gotten into a ditch. They chose the wrong path. They got stuck in a ditch. We used our truck to pull them out, and we were heroes. We drove on till it was getting nighttime, and we came across a road stop. And we go into the road stop and say, hey, we need rooms. There was 5 or 6 of us. We need rooms for these people. And the people that owned the road stop said, no, you don't want to stay here. What do you mean we don't want to stay here? It's the only place around. There's no place else we can stay. Well, we have a truck that's coming in tonight, and it's got Army recruits. And Army recruits, when they come into the towns, they're going to drink, they're going to have fun, because the next thing you know, they're going to be in the Army and they won't have the ability to do that. So it's like, yeah, we don't really want to be here when these young youth show up and really have a chance to raise hell. So luckily, the mayor of the town had a hostel. He had a couple of rooms that during the tourist season, which is a very short period of time, but there's a tourist season where people are transiting through. During the tourist season, they open it up. He says it wasn't tourist season. It was still snow on the ground and still cold. But he says, I'll open it up. And our people were negotiating in Mongolian, negotiating as to what they're going to do. They say, okay, they're going to open it up, but they only have room for 5 of us. There was 7 of us counting our drivers, or I think that was the right number. And so they go and they take the boards off because they had boarded up for the winter. Take the boards off. We go in, and hanging in the middle of the room was a light bulb. Underneath the light bulb was a stove, and around the room was 5 cots. That's it. No bathroom, no sink, no electricity to speak of except for the light bulb. And my Japanese friends are going, Jim-san, you told us it would be very cold, but it's not cold. We brought all these heavy sleeping bags and sweaters and jackets, but we don't need them. Well, that night we slept in this room. There were no windows in the room, just the light hanging down. Our drivers actually slept in their trucks because there wasn't enough room for them. The next morning we get up, and there was a kind of a hallway to get out the door. We go and open the door, and we're blinded because outside it is a blizzard. Our car is covered. We can't even see our car. And I told my friends, I said, okay, this is what Mongolia is supposed to look like. This is the cold that we're supposed to see. So, we got up. There was really nothing for breakfast to speak of. I don't think we ate anything there. We got into our trucks, our 4-wheel drives, and we took off. And as we're driving, before we got to the paved road, we had a flat tire. And so we stopped to change the flat tire. And as we changed the tire, the snow's coming down. We got to get out and stretch our legs a little bit. And then a little bit longer, we went a little further, and we were getting hungry. So we stopped at a yurt, which is basically a tent that's made out of felt, and it's they use them to travel with to move from one location to another. But in this case, there was a yurt. There was a lady there, and she was going to fix us something to eat. So she fixed us some meat and some vegetables. They don't do a lot with vegetables there because the growing season is so short. There's really no chance to grow vegetables. So it's basically meat. And as you're eating it, so she cooked it in the middle of the yurt. And she cooked on an open fire, and we're standing around there. And Dr. Uno, who has a PhD in food technology, goes, I'm not going to eat it. And he always brought his ramen. And he says, ramen is safe because they boil the water. From the boiled water, I can eat my ramen. I'm safe. We're like, okay, whatever. So he had his ramen. They fix this thing. And as we're starting to eat it, you're kind of looking around going, no refrigeration. We're eating this meat. We don't know what it is. It turned out it was a It was mutton. It was sheep, an old sheep. It tasted terrible, but we were hungry, and it had never seen refrigeration. We don't know how long the animal had been dead or where it was stored. Granted, it was cold outside, so I guess everything was refrigeration. We ate it, didn't get sick. Dr. Uno enjoyed his ramen. We got in the car and we drove the rest of the way back to Ulaanbaatar. Great experience. Again, saw things that people never get a chance to see. Not only did we see the fields where, not the fields, but the forest where they were harvesting the blueberries, but we saw the barren land where they were farming their horses or letting their horses graze. And one of the things that we talk about in Tragedy of the Commons is if everybody owns the land, nobody maintains the land. If there's a blade of grass over here, I'm going to make sure my horse gets to it. And that was the obvious situation in that. It turned out that at the end of the day, we had a great success on the blueberries. We'll talk about that in one of our case studies. The horse meat, we never were able to put it all together. USAID, in their general wisdom, decided to shift directions, and we weren't able to do that. But we were able to make our shipments of jam, blueberry jam, to Japan that met Japanese agricultural standards, produced in a yurt by very primitive, unsophisticated food technologists. So great example of seeing an opportunity. I mean, people have been around there. As I say, they said there's no opportunity. There's no demand for the blueberries. And again, I laugh every time I say that because it's like saying there's no demand for oxygen or water. There is demand for blueberries, but they didn't see it. They didn't see the opportunity. Other people have gone in to try and develop opportunities. Oh, horses, lots of horses, let's develop horse meat. Well, that still isn't developed to the point it is. The blueberries were an opportunity we developed and achieved some success. There is a rest of the story, and we'll talk about that on that case study.